Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be surrounded by voices, yet hear only silence? To give your whole life shaping the dreams of others, but return home each night to an empty room. There are people among us, ordinary faces we pass every day, who carry extraordinary burdens of loneliness, and we never stop long enough to notice. This is the story of one such man, a man who gave everything he had to the world, but quietly believed he had nothing left for himself. His name was Mr. Thomas Gray, a 62-year-old high school English teacher in a small town of Maplewood, America. For nearly 4 decades, Thomas had walked the same creaking wooden hallways of Maplewood High, chalk dust clinging to his coat, books tucked under his arm, and a tired but gentle smile on his face. To his students, he was the strict but kind teacher who always insisted on handwritten essays, who quoted Shakespeare when he wanted to make a point, and who believed that every young person had a story worth telling. But outside the classroom, life was very different for him. Thomas lived alone in a modest, one-bedroom house on the edge of town. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 15 years ago from illness, and they had never been blessed with children. After her death, the laughter in his home had faded into silence. His days became predictable: school, home, tea, a book, and the long stretch of quiet nights. Neighbors greeted him politely. Students respected him. Colleagues admired his dedication. But when the final bell rang and the hallways emptied, Thomas Gray was just another old man walking home alone. Every evening, he would sit by his window, looking out at families across the street. Mothers calling children in for dinner, fathers returning from work, the hum of life filling the night. He would smile softly, but deep inside, he longed for something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. What no one knew was that his birthday was approaching. And like every year, there were no plans, no phone calls, no one waiting with a cake or a gift. Just another day in the quiet life of Mr. Thomas Gray. The week of his birthday arrived, but in Thomas's heart, it felt like any other week. The town of Maplewood was alive with the rhythm of ordinary life. Children playing by the sidewalks, families shopping for groceries, teenagers laughing in the diner. But for Thomas, every smile he saw outside was a gentle reminder of the silence waiting inside his own home. On Tuesday, as he graded essays late into the evening, he paused at one line a student had written: "No one is truly invisible, because everyone matters to someone." He stared at those words, and for a brief moment, his chest tightened. He whispered to himself, "Does everyone really matter to someone? Then, who do I matter to?" The truth was painful in a world full of people. Thomas felt invisible. His colleagues respected him, yes. But once the school day ended, they went home to spouses, to children, to warm kitchens filled with chatter. His students admired him, yes. But to them, he was just Mr. Gray, the teacher. A figure that belonged only in the classroom, not in their personal lives. And so, as his 63rd birthday approached, Thomas quietly prepared for it the way he always did, by not preparing at all. No cake, no phone calls, no visitors. Just another evening where he would make a cup of tea, sit by the window, and watch life happen across the street, as though he were only a spectator of the world, not a part of it. But loneliness is heavier on certain days, and birthdays are the heaviest of them all. On the morning of his birthday, Thomas walked into school carrying his worn leather briefcase. He said nothing to anyone, and no one said anything to him. He didn't expect them to. Why would they know? He never told anyone. It was easier not to. Yet, as he taught Shakespeare that day, his voice trembled slightly. When he quoted "We are such stuff as dreams are made on," his students noticed a faraway look in his eyes. But teenagers rarely ask about the sadness of adults. They assume teachers are unshakable, timeless, unaffected. By afternoon, he sat in the teacher's lounge, quietly eating his sandwich. Around him, the room buzzed with laughter and weekend plans. He tried to smile, but in truth, he felt like a ghost sitting among the living. When the final bell rang, Thomas walked home slower than usual. Each step felt heavier, as if the world had pressed all its weight onto his shoulders. He unlocked his door, stepped into the silence, and hung his coat on the same hook he had for years. The house smelled faintly of old books and tea. He placed his briefcase on the chair, boiled water, and poured it into his cup. The steam rose gently, blurring his tired face in the window's reflection. And then, he whispered, almost to himself, "Happy birthday, Thomas." 2 words. 2 words that echoed in the empty room. That night, Thomas sat in his armchair, staring at the quiet street outside. The world seemed to move on without him. Cars passing, lights flickering, children's voices fading into the night. And in that moment, he wondered if his life had truly made a difference. If decades of teaching, guiding, correcting, and encouraging had left even the faintest mark on anyone's heart. Because what is a life if no one remembers the days that belong to you? That night, Thomas dozed off in his chair, the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. The empty teacup rested on the table beside him, his glasses slid down his nose, and the house was wrapped in silence. But destiny had something else in store. The next afternoon, as Thomas entered his classroom, he noticed something unusual. The students, usually restless, half distracted, whispering among themselves, were sitting oddly quiet. Their eyes followed him, not with boredom, but with a strange kind of anticipation. Thomas adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat. "All right, class. Let's begin," he said softly. But before he could turn to the blackboard, one of his students, Emily, a bright-eyed girl with a shy smile, stood up. "Mr. Gray, could you just wait a second?" she asked nervously. Confused, Thomas placed his chalk down. And then it happened. The classroom door swung open, and in walked 3 more students carrying a cake. A simple, homemade cake, its frosting uneven, candles standing crookedly, but glowing like tiny beacons of warmth. The entire class suddenly burst into song. "Happy birthday, Mr. Gray." Thomas froze. His heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. The sound of 30 young voices filled the room, echoing against the walls that had so often carried only his own lectures. As they finished the song, Emily stepped forward. "We found out yesterday it was your birthday," she said softly. "You've done so much for us, Mr. Gray. We didn't want you to spend it alone." The old teacher's lips trembled. His eyes, those tired, gentle eyes, welled with tears he had held back for years. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. You children didn't have to." But before he could finish, one boy shouted from the back, "Of course we did, sir! You're the reason half of us believe we can even graduate. You've always believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves." The room filled with laughter, clapping, and the warmth of something Thomas hadn't felt in a long time. Family. The students urged him to blow out the candles, and as he leaned forward, closing his eyes, he whispered in his heart, "Thank you, Margaret, for sending me this moment." With one breath, he blew out the candles. And in that simple act, it was as if the years of silence inside him were finally broken. The cake was cut, shared messily among students. Frosting smeared on desks, laughter echoing louder than the school bell. And in the center of it all sat Thomas Gray, smiling, not the polite smile of a teacher, but the genuine smile of a man who finally felt remembered. That evening, after the students had gone home, Thomas remained in the quiet classroom. The crumbs of cake still lingered on the desks, the faint smell of frosting hung in the air, and the blackboard still bore the words his students had written in big, clumsy letters. "Happy birthday, Mr. Gray! We love you!" For the first time in many years, Thomas did not hurry home to his empty house. Instead, he sat there, breathing in the warmth that filled the room. It wasn't the cake, it wasn't the candles, it wasn't even the surprise. It was the realization that he mattered, that his life had touched lives beyond what he could ever measure with grades, essays, or attendance sheets. For decades, he had carried the quiet fear that his work would be forgotten, that he would grow old as just another name on the staff list. But that day, those young voices had reminded him of a truth he had long forgotten. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every lesson of hope, plants a seed that never truly dies. When Thomas walked home that night, the town no longer looked the same. The lights seemed warmer. The voices on the street sounded closer. The silence of his little house felt less heavy. Because in his heart, he was no longer invisible. And somewhere, in that quiet, he realized that kindness doesn't always return in the way we expect. Sometimes it comes back years later, in the form of 30 young voices singing happy birthday to a lonely man who had once believed he had no one left. It wasn't wealth or fame that changed a life. It was a simple act of kindness.